The first principle of HACCP is conducting a hazard analysis to identify risks and hazards, particularly conditions that can cause illness or injury. As part of a successful HACCP program, it is essential to create a hazard analysis that is broken into two parts. First, you must evaluate all raw materials, including ingredients, processing aids, packaging, and rework. Second, you must evaluate each step in your process to identify potential hazards. If your hazard analysis fails to identify a potential hazard, then obviously a control will not be implemented, and possibly this will result in illness or injury to a consumer. Before you begin your hazard analysis, it's important to know what a hazard is. For the sake of this training, a hazard is a biological, chemical, or physical property that could cause the product to be unsafe for consumption or use. This could include allergens, unintended contaminants such as salmonella, or it could be a hazard that results from improper handling of materials. In the United States, it is also recommended that you include an evaluation of radiological hazards if necessary. First, let's talk about biological hazards. A biological hazard is a microorganism or a bacterial byproduct that could cause the product to be unsafe for consumption. Rodents, insects, and birds are not considered biological agents and therefore are not considered hazards in this context. The focus here is on microorganisms, such as bacteria, viruses, and parasites. Common sources of these contaminants are from agricultural raw materials, water, personnel, and pests. Here's a list of some of the most common examples of biological hazards. Next, you should consider any chemical hazards. Chemical hazards can include natural occurring chemicals, added chemicals, and chemicals that are unintentionally introduced to materials. Some examples of naturally occurring chemicals would be heavy metals such as lead or mercury, mycotoxins, and even various plant or shellfish toxins. Chemicals can be introduced intentionally during processing, and some examples of those are preservatives, vitamins, or allergens. The reason these chemicals are considered hazardous is because when they reach certain levels, they can become unsafe for consumption and can cause risks to the consumer. Lastly, there are chemicals that can be introduced during processing that are not intended to be part of the product, such as cleaning agents or materials used in and around equipment. The last hazard to include in your analysis is any physical hazards. This will include any foreign objects such as glass, plastic, wood, metal, jewelry, or stones that could cause injury if consumed. These types of materials are not expected to be found in products that are consumable. This means you should also consider bones in boneless products or pits in pitless products as hazards. If the consumer is not expecting it to be present in the product, and it is, then it creates a hazard. Hazards can either be naturally occurring in raw materials, or it could be introduced during the manufacturing process. You should use your process flow diagram to assist you in your hazard analysis. A thorough hazard analysis will look at a product from its entry into the facility and will follow each step in the process to identify potential hazards along the way. A risk assessment should be conducted at each step where a hazard is likely to occur to determine the likelihood and severity of consequence should that hazard occur. The end goal is, of course, to minimize risk to the end consumer and to avoid any possible harm to customers.